The entire dining room exploded with laughter before I even understood what my father had said. To the kids who made something of themselves, he announced, lifting his whiskey glass toward my brothers, and didn't end up cleaning toilets. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Someone choked on wine. My older brother looked down at his plate, pretending he hadn't heard it. My stepmother smirked into her napkin like this was harmless Thanksgiving comedy. I sat there for 3 full seconds, staring at the cranberry sauce trembling beside my hand. My name is Corinne Hale, and at 26, I cleaned floors at a downtown office tower in Chicago during the night shift. Not because I was lazy. Not because I failed. Because after my mother died, somebody had to survive the medical debt she left behind. Dad knew that. He just liked having an audience more. I remember the smell of turkey and bourbon mixing together while heat crawled up my throat. I wanted to scream. Instead, I placed my napkin beside my untouched plate and stood quietly. Dad laughed again. Don't be sensitive, sweetheart. I looked him directly in the eye for the first time that night. Then I walked out carrying something he never noticed I'd taken. The envelope stayed untouched on my passenger seat the entire drive back to my apartment. Dad probably assumed I'd stolen cash out of spite. That would have matched the version of me he told everyone about. Unstable, emotional, irresponsible. Easier to explain than the truth. Rain hammered Chicago hard enough to blur traffic lights into bleeding colors. I sat outside my building with both hands gripping the wheel, staring at the cream-colored paper I'd slipped from his office before dinner. The deed to our grandmother's lake house. My grandmother left it to me before she died. I knew because she told me privately during hospice while Dad was downstairs arguing with nurses about insurance costs. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "Your father only values things he can show off. Don't let him take this too." 3 weeks after the funeral, Dad claimed the paperwork couldn't be found. Until Thanksgiving. Inside the envelope was another document folded beneath the deed. A loan notice stamped final warning in red ink. Past due, $418,000. My stomach tightened instantly. Dad wasn't mocking me because I embarrassed him. He was terrified. And judging from the numbers printed across those pages, whatever he'd done behind closed doors was collapsing faster than anyone in that dining room realized. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad standing at the head of the Thanksgiving table with that smug smile, like humiliating me was part of the entertainment. But underneath it now, I saw something else. Panic. By 6 in the morning, I was sitting inside a 24-hour diner near the office tower where I worked nights, reading every page from the envelope again. The loan wasn't tied to the lake house itself. Dad had leveraged his construction company against multiple properties, including Grandma's place, without fully owning it, which meant one thing: fraud. My hands shook so badly, I spilled coffee across the table. Dad spent years acting like I was the family disappointment while he secretly drowned in debt deep enough to bury all of us. I thought about calling him, thought about demanding answers. Then my phone buzzed. It was my younger brother, Ethan. "Dad's looking for you," he whispered immediately. "He's furious." I stepped outside into the freezing wind. "Why?" Silence stretched for a second. Then Ethan lowered his voice further. "Because the bank came to the house this morning. Mom didn't know anything. Corinne, they're talking about criminal charges now." Before I could answer, another voice exploded through his phone. "Dad's. Tell her she owes me that envelope." I hung up before Dad could say another word. For the next hour, my phone filled with voicemails that shifted between rage and desperation so fast it made my chest ache. One message called me an ungrateful failure. The next begged me to stop making things worse. I saved every single one. That evening, I walked into my shift carrying the envelope inside my backpack like it contained explosives. The downtown tower was nearly empty because of the holiday weekend. Marble floors reflected the pale blue security lights, while my cleaning cart rattled through silent hallways. Nobody there knew my father owned half the construction contracts inside that building. Nobody knew he spent years mocking the daughter, quietly scrubbing fingerprints off elevators while his own empire rotted underneath him. Around midnight, my supervisor stopped me near the executive offices. "Corinne," he said carefully, There's a man downstairs demanding to see you. I already knew. Dad stood inside the lobby wearing the same old coat from Thanksgiving, except now it looked wrinkled and soaked from rain. Security kept him behind the glass barriers while he argued loud enough for half the building to hear. Then his eyes landed on me. His entire face changed instantly. Not anger.
Fear.
Please, he mouthed through the glass. You don't understand what's happening. But I finally did. For the first time in my life, my father needed something from me. I should have walked away. Part of me wanted to leave him standing there beneath the fluorescent lobby lights, trapped behind security barriers like every stranger he used to sneer at. But something about the way his shoulders shook stopped me cold. Dad never looked small. Not once in my entire childhood. I signed out for my shift and followed him into the empty parking garage beneath the tower. Rainwater dripped through concrete cracks overhead while distant traffic echoed between pillars. Dad kept rubbing his hands together like he couldn't feel them anymore. They froze everything, he muttered. Accounts, contracts, all of it. I leaned against my car without answering. They think I forged ownership documents, he continued. If this goes public, I'm finished. You forged Grandma's signature? His eyes darted away. That silence told me enough. Something inside me cracked then. Not from shock, but grief. I remember my grandmother teaching me how to braid pie crusts in that lake house kitchen while Dad spent weekends chasing investors instead of visiting her. You humiliated me for years, I said quietly. And you were stealing from dead family members the entire time. Dad swallowed hard. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded newspaper clipping. At the top was a photo of me entering the office tower. The headline read, Janitor daughter connected to financial fraud investigation. The blood drained from my face, so fast I nearly dropped the clipping. Beneath the headline was my full name, my apartment block, even the night shift schedule somebody had leaked to reporters. The article implied I helped move fraudulent documents through the office tower where Dad's company operated. I didn't do this, Dad said immediately. I swear. But he looked guilty anyway. I shoved the paper against his chest. You let them drag me into this? They came after everybody connected to me, he snapped, panic rising again. Lawyers told me to stay quiet until we controlled the story.
Control the story.
Like I was just another mess to manage. My phone started vibrating nonstop. Unknown numbers. Messages from cousins. Former classmates. One text simply read, Saw your article.
Damn.
Humiliation burned hotter than anger now. Dad stepped closer carefully. If you give me the deed back, I can fix this before prosecutors file anything official. You can't fix this. I'm your father. No, I said, finally understanding it completely. You're the reason people think my life deserves less respect. The garage fell silent except for rain striking concrete. Dad's expression collapsed. Then another car entered the underground level. A black SUV. Two men in dark coats stepped out carrying folders. One flashed a badge toward us. Corinne Hale, he asked calmly. We need to discuss the evidence your father tried hiding under your name. Dad grabbed my arm before I could answer. Don't say anything, he hissed. You'll make this worse. One of the investigators stepped closer immediately. Sir, let go of her. The look on Dad's face terrified me more than the badges did. His eyes weren't angry anymore. They were cornered. I pulled my arm free slowly. The older investigator introduced himself as Agent Mercer from the Financial Crimes Division. He already knew everything about me, my work history, medical debt, even the date my mother died. Unlike Dad, he spoke gently. We know you weren't benefiting from the fraud, he said, but your father transferred several shell accounts through your identity. Dad exploded instantly. That's a lie. Mercer opened the folder. Inside were signatures. Mine. Except they weren't mine. Dozens of forged documents stared back at me from the pages. Credit lines. Property transfers. Tax filings.
Years of them.
My knees almost gave out. Dad kept talking, voice frantic now. I was protecting the family. Everything I built was for you kids. No, I whispered. Everything you built needed victims. Mercer asked if I'd cooperate fully against him. Dad looked at me then the same way he had at Thanksgiving, expecting silence, expecting loyalty. But humiliation changes shape after enough years. I looked directly at the agents and finally said the one thing my father never believed I would. Yes. The trial lasted 11 days. Dad never looked at me when I testified. He sat perfectly still beside his attorneys while prosecutors displayed forged signatures across giant courtroom screens. Every lie he buried under my name surfaced one piece at a time. The hardest moment wasn't hearing the evidence. It was hearing Ethan testify after me. My younger brother admitted Dad pressured him for years to stay quiet about missing money, fake accounts, even Grandma's altar documents. Watching Ethan's hands shake on the witness stand hurt worse than anything Dad ever said to me. Because we both spent our lives protecting a man who never protected us back. By the final day, reporters filled the courthouse steps. Cameras followed Dad silently as officers escorted him outside after sentencing.
Fraud.
Identity theft. Financial conspiracy. 7 years. He finally looked at me then. Not furious. Just empty. 6 months later, I stood inside the lake house kitchen holding fresh paint samples while sunlight poured across the counters Grandma once leaned against. I had left janitorial work behind and accepted an operations position with the same company whose floors I used to clean overnight. Turns out the CEO noticed how I managed crises long before anyone else did. Outside, waves rolled quietly against the dock. For the first time in years, my last name felt clean.